Sound better? Yeah. Well, that was a long, soundless intro. As I was saying, this is good content, so unfortunately, I have a soundless intro. But you basically, you could see on the screen what I was doing. I was just reviewing that we covered First Lord, Second Lord, Third Lord. Now we're going to talk about Fourth Lord. This content is what I call, these techniques for today are what I call very big. They're big content. And that is because what I mean by big is you can use this content in a billion situations and circumstances. It's not like a small technique that you only use once in a blue moon. These are big techniques that apply everywhere, that he's going to just illustrate in reference to the fourth house. So the first thing that he has said is conditions that make the mother happy and conditions that kill the mother. Those are the two conditions. And what does he mean by make the mother happy? Because the name of the fourth house is mother. Don't forget, in this text, Montreshwar seldom refers to the houses by number. He usually refers to them by some kind of a name, because it's easier to remember, and he's writing a book that's supposed to be memorized. So here he's referring to the fourth house as the mother. So when he says kill the mother, he means ruin the fourth house. And when he says make the mother happy, it means make the fourth house prosper. So in this text, there's a certain set of conditions that will make the fourth house prosper and a certain set of conditions that will make the fourth house suffer. Guess what? We already did that. That was the beginning of that was chapter 15, really, right? So this is sort of just like a summary or a reapplication of those same principles. So it will sound very familiar to you. The conditions that make the fourth house prosper. If the fourth lord and the moon are strong. You heard about that before. The lord of the house and the karaka of the house. If the fourth lord and the moon are strong, if they're aspected or joined by benefics and friends. All right, so if your fourth lord is Mars and it's joined by Jupiter, who's its friend. If your moon is joined by the sun, who's its friend. Or aspected by those planets. Or by benefics, Venus, Jupiter. Then that's good for the fourth house, right? It's simple stuff. Also, it's implied that they should not be in a dustana. The reason why it's implied is because when he describes the opposite conditions, you can imply it from that. So first of all, the conditions that make the fourth house prosper are the things that affect the Lord and the karaka. Basically, if the house Lord and the karaka of the house are doing well, then the subjects of that house are interpreted positively. Secondly, it's also about the house itself. If the fourth house has benefics in it and friends in it and the moon. So it's like everything else, these are all cumulative techniques, and you can accumulate goodness or badness. And that makes the interpretation cumulatively more or less intense. If you match every single condition that's mentioned here, then the fourth house is fabulously great. If you match one or two, then it's not bad. If you don't match any, then it's kind of not so special. Just kind of normal. Ready? Good? Make sense? Any questions about that? Meanwhile, let's look at the reversed situation, the conditions that will kill the mother. In other words, conditions that screw up the fourth house. Again, it's the same basic thing. Things that affect the Lord and the karaka. the fourth lord and the moon are in a dustana. It would be also implied from the reverse that if they're weak, or if they're aspected or joined or surrounded by malefics. And then if you have malefics or enemies in the fourth. So really, it's one technique. It's just a mirror image will give the mirror interpretation. So the technique is simply this. Assess the house itself, the lord of the house, and the karka, or the symbol of the house. In the case of the fourth house, it would be the sign, the fourth sign from the ascendant, the lord of that sign, and the moon. Assess those three things. Are they influenced by benefics and friends? As much as they are, give them plus. Do they have their own strength and bala? Do they have their own happiness and dignity? As much as they do, give them plus. Are they not in difficult places? Are they in good places? Trines, angles? As much as they are, give them pluses. How much plus do you have? As much pluses as you added up from that assessment, that's how great your fourth house is. Conversely, check the opposites. Instead of having strength, do they have weakness? Instead of being in good houses, are they in difficult houses? Dustana. Instead of being aspected by benefics and friends, are they aspected and influenced by enemies and malefics? Give minuses for all those. Tally up all the pluses and minuses. What kind of score do you get? That's how positive or negative your fourth is. Or any house. Okay? Any questions? No questions? Maybe because you're so smart and you've heard this before. Now, here comes a new technique, which is really also very big. Like the reason why this one that we just learned is very big is because you don't have to just do this for the fourth house. Do it for the first house too. The first sign, the sign the ascendant is in, the lord of that sign, and the planet that represents that house, the sun. Do it for any house, and that's how you can interpret any house. The next technique is also very big because it's not just for the mother. The next technique will be about your relationship with your mother. But you can do it for your relationship with any type of relationship. So let's say I think I have a question here. What about if the fourth lord Venus is in conjunction with the seventh with Jupiter in Nich Bhanga Yoga? What do you think? What do you think? So what do you think Venus is giving Nich Bhanga Yoga to Jupiter? I don't understand how this Nich Bhanga Yoga is going on. If Venus is the fourth lord, then the fourth house must be either Libra. It's not a dual sign, right? It must be either Libra or Taurus. But Venus is exalted or debilitated in dual signs. So I don't know how there's Nich Bhanga Yoga. I don't know. So tell me what the actual thing is. But look, if the basic information that we have here is the fourth lord is in the seventh house and it's with Jupiter. Those are two pluses. Because Jupiter is a benefic and the seventh house is an angle. And it's angular to the fourth house. So maybe three pluses. Okay? If Libra is in the fourth and Jupiter is in Capricorn in the seventh and Venus is providing, how would Venus provide Nich Bhanga to Jupiter in Capricorn? It's just with a debilitated planet. So anyway, what you have there is you have three pluses and one minus. So that equals +2. So hopefully what you can see is this is the way that you consider all the considerations. And it's not necessary that your evaluation actually equals -2 or +2. You have to do all the steps, but now you should know how to do them. All right. So now this next technique is about relationships with the mother, your relationship with your mother, and by extension, relationships that you have with anybody. We can do it with different. We can change the planets that are involved in the technique to get our relationships with different things. But the cool thing about this technique is it's very simple and obvious too. It's going to just say, how is the first lord related to this other planet in this chart? And that will describe your relationship with whatever that other planet symbolizes. It's a real simple, easy technique. Lagneshe sukhage thava sukhapatao lagne tayor ikshani yoge va shashinas tatha yadi karot yantyam somatu kriyam. Anyonyam yadi shatru nicha bhavane shashtashtame va tayor matu naupakaroti nashasagaye bandhastayor va nachet. So here you get two conditions described. Conditions for a great relationship with your mother and conditions for a bad relationship with your mother. And they are also basically mirrors of each other with some slight differences. So the basic thing is, he says, is the first lord in the fourth house, or vice versa, the fourth lord in the first house? If so, that's closeness with the person represented by the fourth house. Whoever the first lord is, or whatever lord is in the first house, or especially if they exchange, then it indicates closeness with that type of relationship and those type of things and those type of people. So if the first lord is in the fourth house, it's close relationship, or close may not mean warm, but means close, important, significant, big impact. With the mother, your mother, first lord in the fourth house, or vice versa, or the first and fourth lords in aspect or conjunction with each other implied, or the moon. Actually, it's a little more than implied. Anyonyam. Anyonyam is explicit. Lagneshe sukhage. If the first lord went into the fourth house. Atava shukapata lagne. Otherwise, if the fourth lord went into the first house. Tayori ikshani. If each other, they're aspecting each other. So let me write that in, because that's explicitly said it. Aspecting or conjoining each other or the moon. So it's very simple, really. He's saying, does this chart show a tight relationship between the fourth house and the first house? If it does, that indicates a tight relationship between the native and the mother of the native. Your mother. So the two ways to get it is, you might have the first lord in the fourth house, fourth lord in the first house, or you might have the first and fourth lords joining. Or if not physically joining, they might be mutually aspecting each other. Or there's a third thing. A third way is that the moon is also a fourth lord by nature, because the moon also symbolizes the things the fourth house symbolizes. So if the first lord is with the moon, or if the first lord is... interesting. If the first lord is very close to the moon. So what you have in practicality is a lot of pluses and minuses to add up. So for example, Capricorn ascendant, Saturn is in Taurus, Moon is in Gemini, Mars is in Leo. Mars is the fourth lord. So in that condition, if we want to evaluate the mother, the relationship to the mother, the Mars and Saturn have some kind of mutual aspect on each other. If the degrees are right, they'll have 75%-ish mutual aspect on each other from Leo to Taurus. But the moon doesn't. So there's a closeness between this native and the mother, but there's also not. It didn't go all the way. So that's how you add things up. But he's going to tell you something else interesting next, too. The type of distance between the houses. Let's see what he says. Conditions that indicate a difficult relationship with the mother. The first and fourth lords are sixth and eighth. Shashtame. Positions relative to each other. Or the fourth lord and the moon are in enemy or debilitation signs. So what is this? This is basic relationship geometry. I think you could search YouTube for, I think I did a video called Geometry of Relationships, which would explain what trines and angles, etc., signify in synastry. The difference with this technique, the synastry technique is where you assemble these geometries between two charts. But when you're doing it within one chart, the difference is that fourth is strong. It's not bad. The squares are strong. So, the very difficult geometry is 6-8. So, for example, if Saturn is in Taurus and Jupiter is in Libra, well, Libra is the sixth sign from Taurus. So it's 6. And then from Jupiter to Saturn, it would be the eighth sign. From Libra all the way around to Taurus is 8. So having one thing in Taurus and another thing in Libra is an example of having things in mutual sixth and eighth. This particular situation is not good for relationships. The people won't see each other, or they won't cooperate with each other. They won't have the same interests, because that's what the 6-8 combo represents. The mirror image of that is a 2-12 combo. So for example, if Saturn is in Gemini and the moon, Saturn is in Taurus and the moon is in Gemini, then it's two signs from Saturn to the moon, and it's 12 signs from the moon to Saturn, so it's 2-12. 2-12 is like 6 and 8, but without the distance or without the enmity. 6-8 is like an inimical kind of not understanding each other. And 2-12 is a non-inimical kind of not seeing each other. And there's something even more interesting about it. Which one is in the 6th and which one is in the 8th, or which one is in the 12th and which one is in the 2nd also seems to be important. So, for example, having the moon in the 2nd house from the first lord indicates that it does not indicate, let's say, closeness, like physical, tangible closeness between the mother and the native. But it indicates that the mother is supportive, because the 2nd house is supportive. Similarly, the planet that's in the 8th to the other tends to give its resources to the other. But the planet that's 6th to the other tends to be an enemy of it. Okay, so these are really interesting principles. These are very big techniques. You can take these principles and spend a month, a year, 10 years exploring them, working with them, using them to get information from charts. Very, 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 very useful, big scope techniques. So again, you just assemble the pluses and the minuses. Any questions about the technique? It's a very good technique. I'll read it to you one more time while I see if you have any questions. Lagne she sukha ge. If the first lord goes into the 4th house, atava shuka patao lagne, or the 4th lord goes in the 1st house, tayor ikshane, atava tayor ikshani, or if they both aspect each other, yoge va, or if they both conjoin each other, shashinasva, or if they both aspect or conjoin the moon. Those are all pluses. for the closeness of the relationship, which means tangible closeness. Tata yadi karoti. What he's literally saying here is this person will... Tata yadi karoti antyam somatu kriyam. What they will actually do is perform the mother's funeral rites, which means that the relationship with the mother will be strong all the way up to the end. And what it also means is antyam somatu kriyam also means they do things for their mother till the very end. Which what it basically means is there's a very strong close. It's a very culturally specific way of saying this person is tight with the mother. They stay together with the mother. They don't leave. Anyonyam yadi. Or on the other hand, if they are both in shatru nicha bhavana, if they are in signs that make them depressed, or if they're in enemy signs, or if they're shashtashtameva, tayor, if they're sixth and eighth to each other. Matu naupakaroti, they don't do anything good for their mother. Nasha sagaye, and they kind of screw up. The relationship is screwed up. They don't help at the mother's funeral. All right. Then he explicitly says this is a big technique. You can take this same principle and use it on other things. So he says, as far as I know, there's no question, so I'm going on. Matri bhavoktavad vacham pitri bhratri sutadishu bhavakaraka bhavesha lagna lagneshvarayar vadet. Matri bhavoktavad vacham pitri bhratri sutadishu. The technique for interpreting the relationship with the mother can also be used for the relationship to the father, siblings, children, etc. Bhava karaka bhavesha lagna lagneshvarayar vadet. The technique examines the relationship between the first lord and the lord and karaka of the house, in addition to the condition of the house itself and the house reckoned from the karaka. So he's actually done something nice for us here. He's explained the formula behind the technique so that you can use it as a template. He's explained the template on which the technique is based. Usually we have to do that ourselves. We have to figure out the template ourselves. So he said this technique is all about examining the relationship between the first lord and some other planet. So if you want to figure, and some other planet and some other house. So if you want to figure out the relationship with the father, you do it with the 10th house and the sun. If you want to figure out the relationship with the grandparents and the extended family, you do it with the 9th house and Jupiter. If you want to figure out the relationship with the spouse, you do it with the 7th house. Oh, everybody's excited now. You do it with the 7th house and Venus. If you want to figure out your relationship with enemies, you do it with the 6th house and Saturn. If you want to figure out your relationship with the siblings and competitors, you do it with the 3rd house and Mars. Etc., etc., etc. And then you also consider the house itself. Yeah. Boom. No questions? We'll go on and look at the 12th text. Wait, that was the 12th. We'll look at the 13th. Make sure I'm getting no questions indeed. There are actually questions. Let's see. Emerald Empress likes this. What about... All right, hang on. Dawn asks, what about those in angles to each other? Would it always be inimical? No, that's what I'm saying. As far as I believe, as far as the way that I do these things, the angles are difficult when they're between two charts. But when things are angular to each other in one chart, they strengthen, they fortify each other. Ronaldo says, what what's a little confusing is like someone have the next ascendant sign. I don't get it. Now I see why there's no questions. All right, so let's go on. So this is 13. Sustao Sukesha Brigujao. So now he's going to talk about some other stuff about the fourth house besides the person, the mother. What else is there about the fourth house? Actually, the first text was calling the fourth house the mother. Then he actually talked about the relationship with the mother in text 11 and 12. Now in this one, he's going to say other specific things about the fourth house besides mother. You can investigate them more further by this technique. So you have a lot of pluses and minuses to tally up. Within one technique, there's many, and then you have to put several techniques together. So for example, you might have a person that's got a terrible house and a great mother. Well, how can that be if the fourth house represents both your home and your mother? It's because there's other things that represent your property and your mother. So for example, this is a very simple example, is if you have a wrecked Venus and a fantastic moon and everything else on the fourth house equal, then you'll have a good... If your fourth house is good and your moon is great and your Venus is terrible, then you won't have a comfortable property and homes and beds and things, but you'll have a great relationship with your mother. So you have to take all the techniques. Each technique has its pluses and minuses that you have to summarize, and and then you have to take all the techniques together and sum all those up. So now he's saying, here's how you get an analysis specifically on the angle of property and luxury and comforts and things like that from the fourth house. Remember, the fourth house represents the stuff that's inside your home. So your pantry, your refrigerator, your couch, your TV, your bedroom, your bed, your pillows, your jewelry box, your closet. That's all fourth house. So all the things that happen there are directly impacted by the fourth house. How relaxed you can be, how well you sleep, how safe your place is, how safe you feel, how you can be quiet, how you can rest, how you can relax, how you can have recreation. What kind of sex can you have? Nobody thinks that the fourth house is a sex house, but it is, because you have sex in your house, unless you do it for a living. Then you usually have it somewhere in your own property. All those people don't generally think what kind of food we eat, but it is. The fourth house is very important for anything that happens inside your house. But the planet that would be most directly amplifying or contradicting that would be Venus, not the moon. So we say that a house has karaka, but actually houses have multiple karakas because they have multiple facets. So when we say the moon is the karaka for the fourth house, we mean that's mostly the karaka. What the planet that best represents the fourth house is the moon, because moon also symbolizes your house in a way. But Venus is also a karaka for the fourth house because Venus symbolizes pillows, beds, private space, etc., etc., etc. So we're just going to say, look at Venus too. Sustao Sukesha Brigujao. Brigujao is Venus. Sustao Sukesha Brigujao Tanu Bandhu Yuktav. Andolikam Janapateshvaratam Vidatta. Suvarnadyam Hardhyamani Bhushanapatashaya Kamopabhoga Kharani Chago Gajashvan. What is this? Sustao Sukesha Brigujao Tanu Bandhu Yuktav. Sustao Sukesha Brigujao Tanu Bandhu Yuktav. Andolikam Janapateshvaratam Vidhatta. Swarnadyamardhyamani Bhushanapatashaya Kamupabhoga Karani Chagogad. Wait, maybe there's a syllable missing. Kamupabhoga Karanani Kamo papoga karanani. That can't be right. Karanancha. Go, Josh. Let me look at this Devanagari 1 second. That does not look right. I mean, it's not that consequential. We're in 13, and this text is number 13. 16, 13. 16, 13. Kamo papoga karanani cha go gajashva. I got it. Why is it? It's easier to read in the Nagari. Kamo paboga karanani chago gajash. I'm sorry to keep you waiting all this time on something that you're not interested in it. So conditions indicating luxury. Simple. There's one condition. Venus joins the first and fourth lord in good conditions. And then he just describes what he means by luxury. Luxury includes things like fancy cars, lordship and influence, ability to be generous, acquisition of gold, jewels, and fine clothing, wealth and resources, and kama upaboga, sexual enjoyment. So he's saying the techniques that we did before were the first and fourth lord combining with the moon. Instead of the moon, put Venus. How does the first and the fourth lord sum up with Venus? That will give you insight specifically into the stuff about the fourth house that doesn't have anything to do with your feelings and your mom. So that will be your luxury, your prosperity, your property. Makes good sense? And I think we've come to... we have one more text. Conditions indicating trouble. So now the reverse principle he gives in a separate text. Dushte sukeshe, dushte sukeshe, kujasura yukte, sukhe piva janma griham pradagdham, jirnam tambo manda yute yukte, parairhatam gokshati vadhanadhyam. Well, this is very cool. This is the grand finale of today. This technique is super, super cool and kind of inviting to figure out the template of and use this template in any other situations. So conditions indicating troubles to home and property. The fourth lord is in a dusthana and joined or aspected by certain planet pairs. So the template there is this, simple. If the lord of a house is difficult, then that house has problems. But what kind of problems? The kind of problems is indicated by the nature of the difficulty. This is the big template that you can use all the time in every chart in every house. And you can reverse the template. If the lord of a house is in good situations, then the house prospers. And how does it prosper? By the type of the good conditions. If it's in its own sign, then it prospers by its own ingenuity and its own strength. If it's in an exaltation sign, then it prospers by being put in a situation where it proves itself. And it skyrockets up. If it's being aspected by benefics, then it has very helpful helpers, friends, mentors, guides, assistants. If it's in the ninth house, then it gets its prosperity from the ninth house. If it's in the fourth house, and he gets his prosperity from the fourth house. That's the template. So what he's specifically going to say here, he's going to apply the template to figure out how troubles happen to the fourth house. So he says, if it's in a dustana, 6, 8, or 12, and then that's problematic. And now if it's joined or aspected by certain pairs of planets. Before with the second lord, we heard about aspects or conjunctions with a certain planet. But this is even more interesting because when you pair things up, you become more certain of the effect. So I'm going to mention certain pairs that are particularly significant. When certain things pair up, they don't really have that much synergy together, maybe. But when other things pair up, they have a lot of synergy together. So for example, when Saturn and Mars pair up, there's a lot of synergy on maleficness. Or when, let's say, Saturn and Ketu, or Saturn and Mars, or when Jupiter and Venus pair up, or Jupiter and Moon pair up, there's certain things that they both have in common that come to the forefront, therefore. So the pairs that he's going to identify are very interesting. And also the planet pairs can also be in the house. These particular pairs of planets will have the same or similar effects if they're actually in the house. So it's either if they're influencing the Lord, or if they're in the house itself, especially if the Lord is in a difficult situation. So the first pair he says is Mars and Sun. And he says there will be pradagda, which means it will get incinerated. So Mars and Sun, they both are fire. So what happens there is there's a masculine effect, just trouble, causing problems. So it will be things like anger, violence, disaster, war will affect that thing. If Mars and Sun are attacking something that's already weak. If it's just Mars or just the Sun, it's not the same thing. Rahu and Saturn as a pair, then the conditions get worn out and broken. They get old. They get dried out. So if the fourth lord is in a dustana with Rahu and Saturn, or if it's in a dustana and Rahu and Saturn are in the fourth house, then the person lives in old buildings that need to be repaired. Their wealth in general, their clothes in general look like that. Their property, their cars. Interestingly, I think this was quite true for me during Rahu Saturn Dasha. I do have the fourth lord in a dustana, but it's not in a, and also when you think about dustanas, you have to do 1 plus if it's literally a dustana, but 2 pluses if it's a dustana, another plus if it's a dustana from the house. So let me explain this with an example. I have Capricorn ascendant, so Aries is my fourth sign, so Mars is my fourth lord, and Mars is in Leo. Leo is the 8th sign from Capricorn, and Leo is the 4th sign from Aries. Oh, the 5th sign from Aries. So it's the 8th from Capricorn, so it's a dustana, so that's 1 minus. But it's a trine from Aries. To be in Leo is to be trine, right? To Aries. So that's not a minus. Actually, that's a plus from that. So it doesn't really strongly evaluate to having my fourth lord in a dustana. It's neutralized. Therefore, it's really kind of the worst thing for the fourth house is to be in the 6th from the ascendant, because it's not a particularly good relationship to Aries, and it's a dustana from the ascendant. Though in practice, I've seen 4 and 8 also give problems, but I think this will also have to do with the moon's position, because the third assessment for the house is the Karaka's position. So, for example, the Karaka being the moon, the Karaka, the fourth house being the moon, it depends on where your moon is. If I have the moon in Gemini and the fourth lord is in Leo, then it's not in a Dusdana. But it's not in a Sustana either. It's just third lord. So hopefully you're following along with that. All right, so we heard these pairs. The first pair was Mars and Sun. That would indicate too much fire, too much male energy. Saturn and Rahu, too much oldness, too much dryness. And then he says just 2 enemies. And he says if you have 2 enemies in the second, enemies of the fourth lord in the fourth house, or 2 enemies of the fourth lord influencing the fourth lord, while the fourth lord is also weak, then your property gets taken by your enemies, gets used by your enemies. Any questions about this stuff? Really, really useful, great templates for techniques. Let me check. Nothing really, right? I'll check now. How do you decide the weights for the factors, like plus for the fourth lord, Dustana, and then plus for being trying to the house? I think you would try to do it without weights and see how it works. The best way to do things is by practice. Of course, you can't practice unless you know your theory. Otherwise, what are you practicing? So most of the people watching right now don't need to practice. They need theory. But let's say you already have your theory understood. Then you'll refine your theory by practicing with it. So, for example, take 3 charts of people you know really well and do your tabulate everything for those 3 people, and then see how accurate your tabulation would be, objectively speaking. And then see if giving things certain weights would improve the picture across all 3 charts. If so, then you probably are on the right track figuring out what the weighting is. And the more you get experience with doing that, the more you have an instinct for what needs to be weighted more strongly than others. Hey, Alf, first Lord video would be roughly 4 weeks ago. I mean, if one is Aries ascendant and the other is Taurus, you're just asking about how 212 works. 212 works in that there's not connection between the people. There's distance between the people. Although one person is not inimical to the other. They don't dislike each other, but there's distance. That's how 212 works. That's how Aries and Taurus, or Aries and Pisces, get along. All right, guys. Thank you very much.